On March 7, 1965, John Lewis walked across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama. The state deemed him a criminal. Armed troopers attacked him, fractured his skull with a nightstick, and left him bleeding on the asphalt. 55 years later, that same man dies. The United States government places his flag-draped casket in the center of the Capitol Rotunda. He is the first black lawmaker in American history to receive this specific honor. The state that once beat him now reveres him. Historically, political agitators face a binary choice. If they push too hard from the outside, the government crushes them. If they step inside to join the government, they typically have to compromise the strict moral codes that define their activism in the first place. John Lewis avoided both outcomes. A marginalized kid from rural Alabama somehow breached the highest halls of power, holding on to the exact same protest signs he carried on the streets. How did he do it? His method was rooted in a phrase he repeated constantly: good trouble, necessary trouble. This was a highly adaptable tactical system, a way to manufacture friction that worked just as well inside the State House as it did on the streets. In the 1960s, the American South was a landscape of strict physical boundaries. Waiting rooms, buses, and schools were legally divided by race. These physical spaces became Lewis's first arena of combat. During the Nashville sit-ins, Lewis and his peers used their bodies as the mechanism for disruption. By sitting perfectly still at a segregated diner counter, they forced the city to physically arrest polite college students, exposing the violence required to maintain segregation. The Freedom Rides applied this same physical pressure to interstate travel. When mobs firebombed their Greyhound buses and beat the riders, local police did nothing. But the tactic worked. The extreme violence forced a crisis, compelling the federal government to intervene and enforce integration. But even as a prominent leader addressing a massive crowd at the 1963 March on Washington, Lewis ran into the limits of outside agitation. The march organizers, afraid of offending the Kennedy administration, forced the 23-year-old Lewis to censor his speech and dial back his criticism of the government. Throughout this era, Lewis operated entirely outside the machinery of government. He was a physical disruptor. His only lever of power was enduring violence in public to pressure the federal government. After the Voting Rights Act of 1965, Lewis recognized a shift in the battlefield. Forcing the government to pass a law didn't guarantee the law would be enforced. To secure equity, the movement needed structural power, the ability to hold public office, allocate budgets, and control the bureaucratic machinery from the inside. This chart shows the exponential growth of minority voters added to the rolls during his tenure as director of the Voter Education Project. He oversaw a massive organizational effort that registered nearly 4 million people across the South. He was weaponizing the ballot box. That growing voting bloc translated directly into local influence. Lewis won a seat on the Atlanta City Council. 5 years later, he aimed higher, launching a campaign for the United States House of Representatives. Securing that structural power came with a heavy personal cost. His primary opponent in that 1986 race was his close friend and fellow civil rights leader, Julian Bond. Lewis ran a ruthless campaign, attacking Bond's record, securing an upset victory that strained their relationship. By defeating a fellow icon to claim a seat in Congress, Lewis crossed a definitive threshold. The man whose skull was fractured by the state was now a voting member of the federal government. The Grand Chamber of the U.S. House of Representatives became his second arena. It is an environment built on strict rules, traditions, and quiet compromises. Most outsiders who enter this room quickly adapt to its decorum. Lewis did the exact opposite. He took the tactics of physical protest he perfected in the Jim Crow South and adapted them to disrupt the legislative process. In 2016, following the Orlando nightclub shooting, the majority refused a vote on gun safety legislation. In response, Lewis led dozens of lawmakers in a sit-in right on the blue carpet of the House floor. He shut down the legislative chamber using the exact same tactic he used 50 years prior. Even as a senior federal lawmaker, he continued to leverage his own physical arrest to draw attention to his causes. He was handcuffed outside the Sudanese embassy, protesting genocide in Darfur, and arrested again during a sit-in for immigration reform near the Capitol. He held his seat for 17 terms, never letting the institution smooth out his radical edges. By maintaining that constant, unyielding moral friction, he earned a unique position among his peers, who began referring to him as the conscience of Congress. In late 2019, Lewis was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Facing the end of his life, he focused his remaining energy on making sure the mechanics of his resistance would outlive him. Just weeks before his death, an emaciated Lewis made his final public appearance. He visited the freshly painted Black Lives Matter mural in Washington, D.C., physically linking the civil rights struggles of his youth to the modern movements operating in the streets today. He also completed his work co-authoring a series of graphic novels titled March and Run. He specifically chose the comic book format because it was the most effective medium to teach young people the precise, step-by-step tactics of nonviolent disruption. On the day of his funeral, the New York Times published an essay he had written shortly before his death. In it, he issued a direct command to the next generation, charging them with the responsibility to continue the work for justice and an end to hate. John Lewis spent his life proving that governing and demonstrating are not mutually exclusive. He infiltrated the system without ever dropping his protest signs, leaving behind a permanent instruction manual on exactly how to make necessary trouble for generations to come.